Welcome back into Pigskin Perspectives. We are back after a just jam-packed weekend full of football. It is the new year, so happy new year. We have reached the year 2024. 2023 is now in the books, but since it's a new year, that also does mean football is rapidly coming to a conclusion. We have only one more game of college football left in this season. The NFL just wrapped up its penultimate week of the regular season, which means the playoffs are creeping towards us very, very closely. A lot of things to get into here. A lot of football. Looking at the playoffs a little bit, NFL wise, see what we need to happen this weekend, basically, and then college football. A lot of stuff going on there. We have a national championship. We'll get into all of that. But first, as always, well, actually not as always today. We're going to start off with the NFL because I figured I'll save college football for later because there's a lot more going on there, I think. So we're going to start off with the NFL. We're going to start with the game that was happening when I was recording last Thursday. It was the Cleveland Browns at home against the New York Jets, and it was the Browns walking away with a 37-20 victory over the Jets. Joe Flacco, another 300-plus yard passing performance. Third straight, which is insane to say for a guy that was just on the bench. Not even on the bench, I should say, on the couch a month ago, basically. Just insane. Browns clinch a playoff spot with this victory. With other results, they have clinched the 5 seed. So they will they will be going up against whoever wins the AFC South again. We'll talk about that in a few, but a huge win for the Browns in this one, getting that playoff spot locked up before next week. Moving on to Saturday, it was Monday Night Football on Saturday because they had to bill it as that. They couldn't do it like, this is NFL football on ESPN. No, it had to be Monday Night Football special edition on Saturday or whatever. But it was the Lions traveling down to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Jimmy Johnson going into the Cowboys Ring of Honor. It was the Cowboys walking away with a 20-19 victory, but not without its controversy. A illegal touching call on the Lions on a 2-point conversion with 20 seconds left. Cost them the game. Again, you could argue that it cost them the game. But we'll just start there with the penalty. There were, I think, 2 different calls that could have been called there, flag-wise. Was the illegal touching for offensive lineman Taylor Decker, who may have reported, may have not. We don't really know. There's also the one that I don't think really anybody's talking about, which is the Lions had too many players on the line of scrimmage. When I looked at it, think it was 7, maybe 8, something around there. Both would have been 5-yard penalties, which obviously the one was called, but it's the whole, thing. It's everything around it, I would say. First off, the Lions go down the field very quickly, get a touchdown, and they're a point behind. You'd figure, kick the extra point, go to OT. We'll figure it out from there. Dan Campbell decides to go for 2, which, okay, you want to win it in regulation. I get it. You go for 2, the whole penalty thing happens, and, Detroit fans doing their thing, thinking that they are the only ones that get screwed on refereeing calls when they're not. Literally, it happens to almost every single team. I mean, literally. This seems to happen once every few years. Lions fans act like it's the end of the world because it's all against them. It happens to everybody. So stop complaining. So the penalty happens, all of that. Well, it's a 5-yard penalty, so they have to redo whatever. So you'd think, okay, just go and kick the extra point now, go to OT. No, they go for 2 again. What happens? They don't get it. But Micah Parsons was offsides. So they basically get the 5 yards back. And we have a third opportunity to just kick it here into overtime. What do? No, they go for 2 again, and then they miss. The refs didn't make the Lions lose that game. Dumb play calling made the Lions lose that game. At some point within, having the penalty on the first 2-point attempt to missing the third attempt, you got to consider, hey, let's just kick an extra point. Let's go to OT. Whatever happens. Well, whatever happened. And the Lions end up losing this game. They're all blaming the refs and not saying, hey, maybe Dan Campbell should have just kicked an extra point on the second or third attempt. It's not that difficult. And, if you want to complain about the refs, go ahead. But don't put yourselves in situations where you need the refs to make decisions when you're in a close game. Go out there and play a better game the rest of the game so it doesn't come down to a reffing decision, and then you blame it on the refs. You put yourselves in that own situation. There's nobody to blame but the Lions here. From the beginning, it was a bad play call to go for 2. It was a dumb call. And Dan Campbell does these a lot. I think he's in close games when they're not in control, the Lions, when the opponent's kind of dominating them and it's still kind of close. Dan Campbell starts to take over the game, and it doesn't usually end out well for the Lions, if we're honest here. So it was an interesting game in Dallas, to say the least. Moving on to Sunday, the Patriots, even though they're very much out of the playoff hunt, they're in the playoff, well, not the playoff hunt, but they're in the hunt for a high draft pick. They keep fighting until the end. They gave the Bills everything they could. The Bills walk away with a 27-21 victory. It's a good win for the Bills, because that, with another result that will be talked about, puts them in position to win the division next week. But if they lose, then it gets really interesting. So it's a very interesting game for Buffalo next week, to say the least. The Chicago Bears pull off a 37-17 victory, and by pull off, I mean they dominated this game start to finish. It was a nice snowy day at Soldier Field. Obviously, they don't have to worry about their own draft pick because they have the Panthers draft pick. And with the way the Panthers played, the Bears clinched that number 1 pick this weekend. So they will maybe be selecting first. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they do what they did last year. Trade down a few picks, get another pick for next year, and hope that pick is up high, just like this one. The Indianapolis Colts get a 23-20 victory over the Las Vegas Raiders. The Colts were in control most of the game. They let the Raiders back in the fourth quarter. Raiders got it close, but it was just never close enough, as it was the Colts walking away with victory in this one. They're still in the hunt for their division next week. A lot of interesting games. The Los Angeles Rams, I did not expect them to play a close game against the New York Giants, but they did, as they barely escape with a 26-25 victory. The Giants, another team that have kind of just been out of the playoff hunt, but they keep giving teams hard tests, and they're making it difficult for everybody. And that's what they did for the Rams. The Rams clinch a playoff spot, so they'll be in the playoffs for the first time since they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. The shock of the weekend, the Cardinals, who were down, I believe, like 28-7 or something like that at half. They come back. They win 35-31 over the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have lost 4 out of their last 5, I believe, something like that. With the loss, they lost control of the division. It's now the Cowboys' division to lose. And things have changed a lot for the Eagles since Matt Patricia became defensive coordinator. He's kind of co-defensive coordinator, but he's the one making the calls. Since he took over, this defense has looked awful. There's no two ways about it. This defense has looked awful. And I really don't know the fix of it other than, taking him off defense, but I don't see that happening. The New Orleans Saints, they win 23-13 over the Buccaneers, who could have clinched the division. They still control their own destiny. They can win next week and they'll win the division, but the NFC South just gets more disgusting week after week, it seems, with just bad football all over the place. Baker Mayfield looked awful on Sunday, and it's what cost the Buccaneers this game. The San Francisco 49ers, with that Eagles loss, clinched the number 1 seed in the NFC with a 27-10 victory over the Washington Commanders. This was an expected result. The more unexpected of it was the 49ers clinching that 1 seed. It should have came next week, but with the Cardinals win, it obviously helped them a lot, and now they can focus on that bye week and just kind of getting healthy a little bit, rest, and then basically preparing for the playoff. The big thing I'm worried about with the 49ers is if they get behind, it just doesn't seem like they can ever get back out in front. And that's going to be a big problem for them in the playoffs if they, have to come from behind. I don't know if they can do it. The Jaguars defeat the Panthers 26-0. The scoreline says everything you need to know. Trevor Lawrence didn't play in this game. He is still injured. I don't think it's going to really affect his status for this weekend, but if it does, that becomes a big problem for the Jaguars, who are still trying to close out the AFC South. The Panthers, as I said, they clinched the number 1 pick for the Bears since the Bears own their first overall pick, and David Tepper, the owner, decides to throw a drink on a fan from his suite, and that is wound up with him getting like a $30,000 fine or something like that, which obviously is peanuts for him. So, yeah, it is what it is. The Panthers just absolutely disaster show this year. This was not a scoreline I was expecting. Baltimore Ravens 56, Miami Dolphins 19. Dolphins coming off that win against the Cowboys, we kind of start thinking, okay, maybe that they can actually beat quality teams. They can beat teams above 500. They're beating those allegations. And then they go out and drop this, and there's no beating this allegation. They're not good. With this loss, it now puts the division in question. They will now be playing the Bills on Sunday Night Football, the last game of the regular season. The winner of that's going to win the division. If the Bills lose, they're out of the playoffs. Miami's already clinched a spot, so they would be in if they do lose, which as of now, it kind of feels like it might happen. I don't know. Bradley Chubb out for the year, torn ACL in the fourth quarter when it was like 48-19. Just brutal. Not great for the Dolphins after this game because Tua also got injured. Also not good. The Texans get a 26-3 victory over the Titans. this is what the game would have looked like if CJ Stroud played a few weeks ago. No real surprise here. Steelers get a 30-23 victory over the Seattle Seahawks. The Steelers, if things fall their way, they might make the playoff. I really don't know. The Chiefs get a 25-17 unconvincing victory over the Bengals. It was not great for either side, honestly. The Bengals eliminated from playoff contention. The Broncos benching Russell Wilson get a 16-9 victory over the Chargers. It was what it was. Not a great game. And then finally, the final game of the 2023 calendar year, the Green Bay Packers get a 33-10 victory over the Minnesota Vikings. The Packers just look back in form after these past few games. And it's all going to come down to next week for them, because as we take a look at what the playoffs look like right now, Baltimore did clinch that 1 seed. With that win over the Dolphins, they've got one of the best shots to win it right now. They sit at 13-3. I really don't know playoff-wise if they can get it done, but it's just kind of worrying for them, for me at least. They seem to always choke in the playoff year after year. This is a year for them to beat those allegations. Right now, Miami's still in the lead in the East. Kansas City clinched the West for the 7th straight year, I believe. Obviously, the AFC South is still up in the air, with Jacksonville, Indianapolis, and Houston all sitting at 9-7. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The Browns are locked into that 5 seed, and then 6 and 7 can be a wide variety of teams getting in here. Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Indy, Houston. I believe Denver has been eliminated, so I think those are the teams left. It's going to be an interesting final week for the AFC, and for the NFC the same way. The 49ers won the division weeks ago. They clinched the number 1 seed, so that's all done there. The Cowboys currently sit as the 2 seed, as the leader of the NFC East, with that win over the Lions and then loss by the Eagles. That ends up there. All the Cowboys got to do is win this weekend, and they will be that 2 seed. The Lions clinched the North. They're sitting at the 3 seed right now. Obviously, Lions fans are not happy with that, even though they probably should be. The NFC South still up in the air. If the Buccaneers lose to Carolina on Sunday, the winner of New Orleans, Atlanta on Saturday, I believe they put that game on, that will be your winner of the division, which is absolutely insane to say, that the Falcons still have a chance to be in the playoffs, which would be absolutely disgusting if you ask me. The Eagles sit at the 5 seed. I believe the non-winner of the NFC East will be that 5 seed. The 6 seed is currently the Los Angeles Rams. I expect them to stay there. They do play the 49ers this weekend, but I truly wouldn't expect the 49ers to have everybody playing. Just truly wouldn't expect that. So I expect the Rams to stay at the 16, and just sneaking in at the 7th seed, it is the Green Bay Packers, who all they need to do is beat the Bears this weekend, and they are in the playoffs. Things have broken their way, and somehow, some way, they could sneak into the playoffs. So given that recaps week 17 of the NFL season. One more week to go. A lot still to be decided, to decide the 14 teams that will be competing in the playoffs for the shot at the Lombardi Trophy. So we're going to move on to college football. What a weekend. What a weekend. We're going to start with those New Year's 6 games. We're going to start way back on Friday in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. Of course, the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. Got to get that right. It was the Memphis Tigers getting a 14-3 victory over the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State's offense just never showed up. Drew Brown got injured. The second or third drive of the game never came back. They had to play a third string most of the game. Half of their team was opt-outs, basically. It just never was going to end up working out well there. And, shout out to the Memphis Tigers. Wow. Missouri Tigers. Shout out to the Missouri Tigers. I think a lot of people going into this year were just questioning if they could go 6-6. Finish 11-2 with a New Year's 6 win. Eli Drinkowitz gets a contract extension. Things seem to be on the up and up in Columbia, Missouri. What a year for them. What a year. Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. It was the Ole Miss Rebels getting a 38-25 victory over the Penn State Nittany Lions. Even the scoreline is kind of deceiving. Ole Miss controlled this game start to finish. Penn State was truly never in it. Lane Kiffin has a really good squad. A lot of them coming back next year. A lot of talk about Ole Miss possibly being in a preseason top 5. I think top 5 is a bit much. I think they can be top 10. But, if they play like they did this year and like they usually do and finish 10-2-ish, right around there, they're 100% going to be in the playoff next year. I guarantee it. With the expansion to 12, it's just, can Lane Kiffin keep this up is the big question. And I think he can. He's shown ways to adapt, and I think he can figure out a way to get Ole Miss to that next level. The Georgia Bulldogs defeat the Florida State Seminoles 63-3. I don't even know where to start, honestly, and I don't even know if I'm gonna start, because the people judging this, saying this is your proof that Florida State shouldn't have made the playoff. 1, you're dumb. 2, bowl games are exhibitions. Does not mean anything. It's just simply what it is. Florida State, I think, had 2 starting players that played in this game. Rest of them opt-outs. They were down to Brock Glenn, the third string quarterback. A lot of their players were second and third strings. They were missing all their offensive weapons, running back, wide receivers, linemen, all of them. They were missing all of them. Georgia, yes, they were missing some, but not as many. And their backups better than Florida State. So it is what it is. Georgia gets the biggest biggest margin of victory in bowl history, I believe. They now hold it 1-2, with the other one being last year's national championship. Yeah, this was a game. It was something. The Verbo Fiesta Bowl, Oregon gets a 45-6 victory. Again, no real surprise there. Liberty hadn't faced any opponents this year, and they were going up against a Goliath in Oregon. Bo Nix, final game, 4 touchdowns, something like that. And his Oregon career ends. So, what a career it was for Bo Nix, the Oregon Duck. Now, it's time to move to the playoff. We're going to start with the Rose Bowl. Michigan wins 27-20 in overtime. And I really don't know where to start with this one. Kind of like the Florida State game. I do have things to say unlike the Florida State game, but This was very, very interesting because it was close it was close the whole game. But neither team had moments where I said, wow, they look like a really good team that could win the national title. Both were playing just bad brands of football, mistake after mistake. J.J. McCarthy throwing an interception on the first play of the game, which ended up being not an interception because the Alabama defender went out of bounds, didn't reestablish, caught the ball, all that dumb stuff. Whatever. You have a muffed punt by Michigan, which ends up being Alabama's first points. You have a muffed punt at the end of the game that almost cost Michigan the game. You had just sloppy mistakes by individuals on the Michigan team, just not seeming to fully get the flow, even though they've had practice for a month. Alabama, you had a center that couldn't snap the ball. He really hasn't been able to all year, which is hard to believe that Nick Saban couldn't figure this out all year because Jalen Milroe has been having trouble with these snaps all year. Jalen Milroe had a crucial fumble, even though the fumble recovery by Michigan ended up in a missed field goal. So no points came out of it, but Alabama had an opportunity to kill the game, and Milroe fumbled it. Just bad plays by Alabama. Offensive line, awful. For how awful the Alabama offensive line was, I do have to give the Michigan defensive line credit. 6 sacks in a game is an insane number. 5 of them in the first half. Insane, but it does show they kind of made the adjustments in the second half to get it done. But that 6th sack was just, of course, when it mattered most. And yeah, both teams had just mental mistakes that shouldn't be happening when you're playing in a national semifinal game in January. That's just the simplest way to put it. You shouldn't be making those mistakes in January, and they still were. There is a lot to clean up for Michigan, I think, going into next week. But they somewhat look as good as they have this year by having all these mistakes, which I truly don't know how. If they win this national championship, it's because of their defense. The old adage of, defense wins championships, that's the only reason why I think they're going to win. Their offense just, it doesn't look like a 21st century offense, if we're being honest. It looks more like something out of the late 80s, early 90s. It's not great. It's winning them games, but it's definitely, it's going to be something because next Monday night, they got an opponent that I think it's going to be a challenge for them, but I really don't know. It feels like Michigan's really in the driver's seat right now. We'll see. Because in that second playoff game, the All-State Sugar Bowl, it was the Washington Huskies walking away with a 37-31 victory over the Texas Longhorns. This was an offensive showcase between Washington and Texas. Texas was... It was back and forth the whole first half. I think we went into the half 28-28 or 21-21, something around there. And then the second half, Washington really pulled out to a lead, and it kind of just felt like the game was over. Washington kind of then started sleepwalking. All of a sudden, Texas back in the game, and then all of a sudden, Texas is getting the ball back with 40 seconds left. At their own 30, basically. So they got to go 70 yards. And they did make it down there. They made it to the 5. and they had four plays with 12 seconds left. Four of the worst plays I've ever seen from or inside the 10. There was a out route that went for a yard, I think, maybe. Second down was a throw to the end zone that was just wide. Third one was a throw to the end zone thrown wide. And 4 was a fade route into the end zone. Washington defender jumps up, swats it out of bounds, game over. Those last 4 plays were the worst 4 plays, I think, for Texas this game. It could have been a lot better. I really did think Texas was going to end up winning this game when they got the ball back with basically 40 seconds left. I mean, they just looked like they could get it done. They almost did. But Washington ends up being in the national championship game. They tried to give this game away as much as they could, but they walk away with the victory. And next Monday night, it's number 1 versus number 2. So basically just like any other year, pre-playoffs, pre-BCS, any of that, it would be number 1 versus number 2 because this is Big Ten, Pac-10, 12, 8, whatever you want to call it, the Pacific Athletic Conference. It would have been a Rose Bowl. So no matter what, this is how the 14 playoff ends. It's ending with a Big Ten team going up against a Pac-12 team that will be in the Big Ten next year. And the more things change, the more they stay the same, kind of. As the only thing wrong with this is that it's in Houston and it's not in Pasadena. All of that chatter about the playoffs, who made it, who missed it, it ends up being 1 versus 2. We could have done this in the BCS and we would have been fine with it. So, yeah, that is what we end up with. And that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. So thank you so much for watching. If you just stumbled across this video and you really liked it, click subscribe, click the like button on the video. Tell anybody you know about it. We'll be back only a few days from now on Thursday. Preview probably only of the NFL because then I'll do another separate episode for the playoff championship game. And week 18, it's here. Football is quickly wrapping up to its conclusion. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon for another episode of Pigskin Perspectives.